Morning all. Some very interesting games from round 3 yesterday in the Olympiad. I have a selection of 15 sacrifices and backfires to show you of general interest, which I've made a note of. The first one is from the Magnus Carlsen game, the very high profile game of course of the current world champion. Magnus Carlsen is playing white. Let's put on Kubica here. Black has just played rook d2. White already has a great position, but Magnus increases his advantage dramatically through a thematic kind of sacrifice. I wonder if you can spot it if I give you 10 seconds to pause the video starting from now. So white play. What would you play if you were Magnus Carlsen? Okay, c5. Putting immediate pressure on black's position. C takes, obviously b7 will be supported by the bishop. So black takes here, but now we get this fast passed pawn. So it's knocking out of the way that pawn for this touchdown effect. So knight ed7, b6, and it's supported by the long range bishop. Queen f4, trying to get some counterplay on f2. And here's the clever bit, using this diagonal. Queen a8 check, coming back to f3, so leaving that really dangerous passed pawn. Black actually simplifies here. What else? If queen e5, then actually knight c4 is strong for king, queen and rook. So what would black do here? If queen d6, again knight c4. So where is the queen actually going? Queen g5. We can just play b7 and black is on the back foot like in the game. So black took here, and we have this strong passed pawn. Rook d4, trying to get this rook b4 in to try and stop the pawn. Now after rook b4, you might think the natural rook a1, that is actually simple and strong, to get rook a8 in, try and increase the pressure of that pawn. Actually even stronger, Magnus played an even stronger move apparently, technically rook d1. So white is now threatening things like g5, hitting the knight on d7, and also knight d5 is useful as well. Black tries knight e5 here, hitting the bishop. The bishop just drops back, so white's trump card is not going anywhere. That pawn, a dangerous pawn. Knight fd7, trying to stop rook d8, for example. Now we see knight c2, hitting the rook. The rook goes to f4. If rook b2, then in this position f4, actually that's why the rook maybe had to keep an eye on f4, because this is all falling to bits now. Say taking here, knight's on, and then actually even the rook drops with the check. So rook f4, it's pretty desperate stuff. Rook d5. So threatening, rook takes e5 to queen the pawn to deflect that knight away from the defense. f6 supporting the knight, but rook takes c5. So white is now a pawn up again, and a very dangerous passed pawn. Knight b8 is played, rook c8, and black actually gave up here. If he tries defending the knight, where he resigned here, if he tries defending, then in this position a number of moves are winning. Bishop c6, for example. So this takes. This is pretty hopeless. White's going to play rook c8 next move. The rook's away from b4 here, so that's winning. Okay, so yeah, it's interesting. It's not so much of a sacrifice as a logical progression with advantage here. White was already doing fantastically well, but I thought it was a neat little breakthrough there for that passed b pawn. Now, something altogether quite remarkable and spectacular. Topalov playing white against Pons. Now Pons has a fundamental problem here, this backward d6 pawn on this d file, and it's interesting how this echoes through this deep positional sacrifice. Pons 2698, by the way, not a bad opponent, but Topalov is slightly higher at 2772, but this is quite a clash of the titans here. Rook c8 was played. So how easy is it for white to get to d6? And also you might notice this is hanging, and it was hanging before, but before there was a pawn on d5 and black could have played knight takes d5, but we reached this position and black's still teasing white to take this pawn. So is it some sort of trap going on here? Would you take this pawn? If I gave you 10 seconds here to think about this, would you take this pawn on f5, or do you think there's a big problem with taking on f5? So 10 seconds now to pause the video, to take or not to take. Okay, well Topalov does take, and we see knight e4. Is the queen in trouble? Well, let's see. If the queen goes to e6, knight takes c3. So it is a double attack actually on the queen and the knight, so it's not just about the queen being in trouble. But yeah, Topalov plays now. Guess what he plays? If I give you 10 seconds here. Okay. Queen sack. Queen takes rook. So it's check. So he's going to win a rook and a minor piece, and he's taken that pawn. Note also positionally. Let's see what else. Basically, the d6 pressure is amplified. If d6 falls, then e5 is weaker. If e5 is weaker, then this bishop is stronger. So there could be a big chain reaction here, positionally. Bishop takes, knight d takes e4. So hitting d6. And it's a very strong knight on e4. Very difficult to dislodge. Queen c7. So a positional queen sack for 2 pieces and a pawn. Quite a lot of material. You know, it's not... Okay, so it's quite a bit of material, but the surprising thing here now is, you know, black's actually in a positional bind. There isn't. It's kind of a paralysed position. There's not much black can do. He can't liberate easily with d5, and actually white just plays rook d2 as if this is going to calmly double. So it's a positional queen sack, but it's so black's getting potentially dismantled. If he loses d6, then e5 is weaker. So king g7, rook fd1, knight f6, dropping d6. In fact, the engine suggests rook takes d6 is even possible, believe it or not. This wasn't played, but it seems there. This is a very, very strong position for white. But in the game, we see knight takes d6, which is also very strong. So look at e5 now. Is that going to drop off? You see that this bishop is now also a very, very strong, dangerous piece. Bishop g3. Bishop e8. And now black seems to be... what is black up to, really? Well, not much, actually. There isn't much counterplay. But white plays an interesting idea. White didn't need to do this. There's actually, with that winning with the f5 pawn, technically, the engine's actually come up with an amazing, what I find is an amazingly good plan here. That in this position, actually f3 is not so bad, with the idea of e4, and then basically getting the knight like this to f5. That would be a very, very strong positional plan. But a different method is used. Rook takes f6, and so still good idea. So knocking out a defence around black's king a little bit. Knight e4. So the queen is having to is encouraged to protect e5, but actually it doesn't here. So why? Why doesn't the queen just drop back here to keep protection of e5? Well, here knight d6 is a very quick way actually to get to f5. Bishop d7. Well, it's actually just winning the exchange there, and then we have rook d5, and still. The e5 control is in white's hands, basically. This is a much better position for white, the 2 bishops and the rook. Black really has very, very little counterplay. So basically here, black played queen g6, and it's better for white. This position is better for white now. Knight d6 hitting the rook. Black hits white's rook in return. We see rook d5, so e5 seems to be dropping off soon. Rook f8, and actually here, instead of taking on e5, c5 is played, and actually this pawn is also pretty dangerous potentially. Bishop b3, rook takes e5, queen c2, hitting the bishop moves, And this is getting very dangerous now for just these c6 ideas, among other things, among rook e7 as well, for black's king safety, and things like bishop e4. It's a bit horrendous for king safety. So rook takes f3 was played, g takes, b takes, b takes, bishop a4. So are these pieces enough to handle the queen and bishop? Well, after check, now c6. And basically, if queen takes c6, knight e7 check, false king and queen. If bishop takes c6, then knight d4 with rook e6 next is winning material, so the 3 pieces against the queen. So the pawn can't really be taken. We see actually black playing h5 after knight d4, queen c4. Now black is threatening h4. So white plays h4, which is very strong actually. G takes, bishop takes. And white has numerous threats here. a5 is played. Check. Check. And now the pawn steps one step further to queen. So white is got all the time in the world, it seems, to just play maybe check and then rook c6 later. So black actually resigned here. Let's give an example. Say bishop b5. I think we can just play the check, and rook c6 will do actually in this position as an example to queen the pawn. Yeah, so it seems as though this this sacrifice from here was very well judged. Knight e4. It seems, you know, black already had structural problems with the backward pawn, and it's the backward pawn which can cause like this chain reaction to undermine e5, which actually makes the bishop actually stronger once d6 drops. So I thought this was quite interesting, this queen sack. And here white could have actually leisurely just played for a knight to f5 in this position. This is another way. Rook takes f6. Just shows how strong actually the white position is. So a remarkable sacrifice there from yesterday by Veselin Topalov, eventually crashing through with his pawn. Now let's go on to another game from yesterday. Peter Svidler, playing white here, plays bishop d4, and this next move by black really badly backfires. It doesn't look good in principle to go into a self-pin. His opponent, Aleksandar Colovic, is a 2-4-8-7. So going into this self-pin, already the engines are crying, you know, queen f2 is good, just to kind of build up pressure on the pin, and then later b4 will kind of potentially win a piece by force. It's quite dangerous, this pin. But rook c1 was calmly played. It still reserves queen f2. And here black played queen b5. And white just smashes through here. It's remarkable how it crumbles for black. G takes now, and black plays g6. This is just grim, because if g takes, f5 is strong, and white has all sorts of pleasant ideas like this, and unpleasant for black. So g6, but now f5, threatening to take here, and things like queen g5. Knight e4 is played, and actually here white, with his queen attacked, can just afford, can you guess? It's such a strong position. F takes g is even possible, because if knight takes h7 is checkmate. It's just totally ruined black's king safety. After fg, now the defender of g5 is there for a moment, but even in this position, before trying to take this out, rook c7, threatening now h7 checkmate, you know, protecting the pawn, and that will be still checkmate. Bishop d7, and now this defender of g5 is taken out. Knight takes e4, and the problem here is, you know, the queen might want to defend g5 like this. But let's see, d takes is not played. If it was, then check is really dangerous. If it takes here, then check. It's just totally crumbled for black. So rook takes is played, just allowing basically queen g5. and it's very difficult to see how black defends this position. If bishop e8, then there's h7 checkmate, so that bishop's got to stop there. It's just remarkable how it crumbled, I thought, from the original position. It seems so knight c5 I'll identify as a kind of backfire, but it's a difficult position anyway. It seems with queen c6, white's got an advantage, but it's not immediately crushing. Any g takes h6 here can be answerable with queen takes h6. So it's just unfortunate this knight c5 really didn't help, it seems, black. Just totally crumbled his king side. Bit of a slaughter there, which kind of caught my eye. So here's Svidler there with white. Now, one of the top Chinese players, Ding Liren, has a formidable position here, a big advantage. And yes, it's another case of black making things a lot worse after d5, extending the scope of the bishop. You see these bishops are quite good here, and white's central control is very, very nice. There's a lot of pressure on black. Best to try and stay on the board is bishop d6. But we see a kind of similar kind of analogous wipeout to what I've just shown you with f6. It doesn't help black go down that slippery slope. It's just very, very quick to go down it after h3, kicking the bishop. And now we see e5 just wrenching open this diagonal. And now also threatening things like d6 to potentially win a piece. Black takes that. And even stronger than bishop takes e5, we see knight h5, stopping black's bishop f6 resource. You know, all this pressure on f6 and f7. If bishop takes e5 was played, then actually no, there's some other ideas for black potentially. There's an interesting resource. Not this isn't so interesting because it could still take a knight h5. There's actually a very interesting resource here, bishop c5, hitting the queen, hitting the bishop. But even this is okay for white. But this is definitely stronger, knight h5. So white's threatening a mate in two with the check, taking on g7. Bishop f6. And it's slaughter time. Knight takes, queen takes. Doesn't matter about h3 here. It's taken. Bishop takes e5, looking to mate with with queen h8, checkmate. So the exchange sacrifice is played to try and stop white's attack potential, but it's the exchange down now, so the game doesn't last too long. The exchange down here, queen g5, rook takes, the bishop takes here, simplifying the exchange down. And here after d6, black throws in a check, and white just plays the very calm rook f3. It doesn't matter now about queen e2 because just rook f2. Check here, king h2 is easily winning for white. d7's on the cards. So yeah, it wasn't an optimal defense. I guess I'm just impressed by the attacking potential, not so much of a backfire. It was already a difficult position for black, but it just shows how quickly these positions can totally crumble. Okay, so this next example, Peter Liko, Hungary team. Peter Liko is playing against Wang Yu, a 2-7-1-8. So this is a real clash of the titans. Peter Liko is 2740. So Queen G7 is played by Wang Yu, Y-U-E. Can you see what white played here? It's a very interesting idea, indeed. So if I gave you 10 seconds here, what would you play as white? Okay, the engine suggests it might not have been the best move actually. It suggests maybe c4 is interesting, just increasing the pressure positionally, quietly. But actually bishop takes d5, so we have a piece sack to get two rooks for the queen. And the point here is the bishop is covering a7, so a piece interposes there. Rook takes d5, and here the king seems to come to the rescue. But now is the point which needed to be really calculated. is that in this position white has bishop e7, so the pressure on d8 is formidable, and actually this just leads to an advantage. It doesn't lead to a mate or anything, it just leads to what seems to be an interesting imbalance advantage, because after queen takes we have actually two pieces for the rook, which normally you'd think is quite good, but white has this potential pass pawn over here, and after king e3, with pressure on g5 here to count, you know, that pressure there, white eventually won in 71 moves from here. One at move 71, which I don't want to show you. I just thought this was interesting, this bishop takes d5 concept. But you know, maybe just c4 was simple as well, simple and strong. D takes, we could take here, for example, king b1. But the diagonal does look a little bit on the dangerous side. Say something like this, what would we do? Maybe bishop d4, leaving black's structure terrible. So okay, so it was interesting though. I just thought it was quite interesting. Bishop takes d5 looked very interesting. Now, okay, so this next example I can show you. So David Navarra playing white against Asan Gaham Magami, and we've got a scenario where it seems as though black may have calculated this as perpetual check, and actually in this position it's not the most spectacular sacrifice ever, so I'm just going to show you. It's just something I made a note of, that just f4 just keeps the queen now on that diagonal, and this stops all the perpetual checks actually, because after queen takes f4 we have g3, so we've got this diagonal to tuck the queen on now on g2, so that stops the checks and white is just clearly winning. Not the most spectacular sacrifice, it's just something to further the advantage. Just seems a nice little trick to bear in mind for your own games if you're in a similar sort of position. So this pawn sacrifice, maybe in a calculation you might have thought this is a perpetual check scenario to avoid. I mean, sometimes the resources are stretched out to try and queen the pawn, and your king safety is often let down sometimes, but here it seems, you know, with the resource f4, it's all made possible to have the cake and to eat it, so to speak. And here after queen c2 actually black resigned, covering h7, so rook takes d8 and queen c8. The king can't really escape from this. If king f8 then takes, throwing a check first to kick the king away from e7, and now queen c8 is winning. So a bit of a neat finish I thought there. The next example I'd like to show you is in Nepomuceni against Vlado Bogdanovsky. Okay, Bogdanovsky at 2-4-2-6 as black played queen e7. Black is a little bit overloaded here, although he's hitting the bishop. Unfortunately it's a check, and now can you see what white simply plays in this position? There's a lot of pressure on black, so it's kind of again a logical sacrifice just to increase advantage. So yeah, when someone's already got the advantage, these sacrifices are not so magical. But what would you play here, just for the record, to increase advantage? Okay, forcing move, bishop takes g5, deflecting the queen away from the knight. After queen takes on f8, black resigned here. It's a very, very bad position. There's no real counterplay opportunities, and white is actually threatening, if white has an on the move, white is threatening knight f6 to block the queen from the bishop, so taking would be lethal after. So black actually resigned here. It's a totally paralysed position as well if we look at this. The rook stuck on h7, the knight's pinned. Yeah, pretty dire stuff. Okay, Shirov, fire on board for the next example. Shirov is playing white, and black seems to have something going on with this seemingly dangerous passed pawn, and plays rook a1. And white is doing very well in this position. Actually, this isn't such a big deal. As long as this isn't taken, then that would be losing a kind of rook. No, that would be very bad. No, instead, can you see what Shirov played here? And it seems White's got a huge position really after this. So his opponent was Anwar, is Magomedov, a 2-5-3-1. Okay, White play rook takes b2. It seems a very logical exchange sacrifice, increasing the advantage of the position actually. So Black did take the exchange, but not immediately. Black took on f1 first, then took on b2. And the point here, okay, so it's actually 2 pawns for the exchange to start off, isn't it? So it's 6 pawns against 4. And White has dangerous threats like Queen a3 hitting c5 to be 3 pawns up. So it's pretty hopeless. There's also the Queen looking at g7. So Bishop h6 as well threatens to win the exchange. And if we played something like Knight g7, well, this is still very, very strong for White. He's just got enough compensation basically. Let's see what happened in the game. Bishop takes b5. C takes b5. So White's still threatening now Queen a3 or Queen c3 perhaps. Queen a3 is even stronger though because it's looking at c5 and Queen a6. And in fact, you know, White's b pawn is so dangerous here after Queen a6. Now in this position, a nice sacrifice forcing move which just emphasizes how lost Black is. What would you play here if I gave you 10 seconds starting from now? So the final move of the game, what did Shirov play here? Fire on board, Shirov. Okay, Bishop f4, just looking at the Queen, trying to get the Queen away from the Rook. Black had to resign here. It's pretty bad. If Queen a8, then actually b6 is possible. This b pawn is an absolute killer. It doesn't matter about being the exchange down at all here with that b pawn. It's just driving way through, for example, like this. Bishop c7, b7. Okay, so that was again, you know, some of these are from great positions, so they're not the most shocking sacrifices of all time, I must admit, but I just thought interesting anyway. Now here, this is a very high level clash, which is one of the reasons I want to show you. This is Zoltan Almazi at 2690. You know, he had won a pawn earlier, and but it was knight versus bishop against Yang Yu at 2668. So they're quite evenly matched on ratings. So yeah, there were some very, very tough pairings yesterday. Very strong teams met each other. Black played bishop c5 check. White needs extreme accuracy here. White plays for an ambitious idea, and I think it does kind of backfire. I think it backfired in some variation which maybe White had in mind. The safest thing would seem to be king f1, and if check here, then the safest here is not here, because, well, the check is fine. That would be, I think, okay for White just about. But actually the problem here is g4 and then winning h2. But actually in this position king e1 might actually be okay, say g4, and it's a very technical position actually. But I want to get to the point here that Black, from being a pawn down after knight d4, it seems Black sort of wrests the advantage from White with queen d5. Forcing White to play c3 now, because if king e3, then the check here wins the knight. So White's forced to play c3, and he loses b3. But with that, a4 is weak, and maybe, you know, White had been hoping to get knight f5 check in, so plays king f3. And here it would seem, you know, Black, if he wants to avoid this vicious-looking knight f5, if he takes the knight here, this should be equal, and maybe that's what white thought would be equal. But a bit of a shocker in this position, which actually maybe shocks white a little bit. Black plays g4 check, so he's trying to get this pin on the knight, so there's no knight f5. And apparently best here is king e2, which should actually still maintain equality. We've still got some ideas here, like knight e6. Apparently it should be okay. Pardon me. But white seems to go downhill with king takes. After takes here, black seems to have something going on. He takes on d4 and b5. He's got dangerous past a pawn, and we get after b4 d6 queen d7 the blockade on this pawn, and these pawns are dangerous, and black later won on move 84. The reason I wanted to quickly mention this game, it was a very high level clash, and it just seemed when white had won the pawn, it wasn't the end of the story. It's interesting with the bishop how dangerous that can be actually, and these pins. Okay, for this next example, Philippe Panzevsky at 2-4-6-4 was, I thought, doing quite well at this point at move 29, about equal, against Sergei Karyakin, one of the strongest players in the tournament, 2-7-8-6. Karyakin just played queen a3, and it's interesting that black has pressure on e4 right now, but this next move takes white's position from about equal to being nearly totally lost eventually. It's a start of a slippery slope here, this rook d1, because now queen a8, and white must now consider, I think, well, the e4 problem. The e4 pawn is a big problem. He plays knight d5. He must shield that pawn somehow, and this looks a little bit unfortunate now after knight takes, e takes. So black's rook is pretty handy. We see here knight d7, as though either knight f6 or b6 might be on the cards to hit the d5 pawn. So this next move from white is bishop e1, and now it seems, from a position which white was doing okay, white is going down a slippery slope quite rapidly. Queen a3. And here we see king h1, and already black's position is so good, the engines are actually indicating rook takes e1 is possible, taking on c3. But we see queen b2 instead, which is another very strong and simple move, probably without causing too much concern for teammates, because actually black is now getting this in, potentially. This bishop hasn't got much scope. One of the points of the pawn on c4 is that it restricts the bishop. This is blunting the bishop, and in fact we see after bishop d2, rook a8, this simple plan of rook a1 is really dangerous and hard to meet. After f5, rook a1, just the bishop, the poor bishop, is being lost there. After fg, hg, white plays queen f1. Okay, now the bishop is actually saved by this, but I still say poor bishop, because now c3 drops, and so black's got that in without sacrificing the exchange or anything, and white resigns here. This is a very dangerous c-pawn now on the cards. It just seems, white had crumbled from what was actually almost an equal position. It seems here a more delicate way of playing things might have been something like knight f1, to avoid all this knight d5 business, to keep an eye on e4, and say for example queen b2. This is given as about equal. It's just very interesting to me how white got totally outplayed from what could have been a fairly level position here, with not too much going on. But as it was a total disaster for this structural change to be inflicted on white. With that e-file, very nice for black, and this rook switching to hit the poor b1 bishop. But in the midst of all that, of course, this Finchette bishop looking at the c3 pawn doesn't help white either. So I thought it was an interesting example there of the high rated just totally outplaying the low rated player. Now here, this was a very dramatic game. Trasnedev, a 2-4, 8-4 against Vladimir Kramnik, 27-60. So again, outrated, but after Queen G7, apparently this is not entirely that bad for White, but this next move puts White on a very slippery slope, B4. Although it seems as though it's like undermining Black's strongest piece, it's actually fractured quite significantly White's structure. And in fact, we see now that White soon starts to crumble after this. After takes here, these are double pawns anyway. Rook B8, and we see H3, and Black gladly here plays Queen E5 to exchange off queens. White obliges, and Black is simply potentially threatening to improve his position slowly but surely with certain moves here. He's got this dangerous pass pawn here, and White made things a lot worse again with this next move C6, which really emphasizes these structural weaknesses actually, because after Rook B6, Black is now threatening not just this pawn but also Rook here. So White plays C5 to stop Rook there, and here I guess this is like setting a cunning little trap as well. If Rook takes C6, then Bishop B5, and the Rook's stranded. But Vladimir he's already done the damage really. He just retreats the Rook. The damage he's done is that he's eyeing now A2. Look at these really glaring bishops. And what seems to be remarkable, and I haven't noticed this really with any other grandmasters, is Kramnik sometimes gets these seemingly simple but totally crushing positions. And here, after Bishop C1, Bishop takes A2, it's an example of a horror. After A5, Bishop E7, Bishop B3, you can see that this is really quite horrific, that these bishops are supporting this passed pawn. White's not able to do anything. In fact, after Rook F1, A4 just resigns. It's like totally spelled out that, you know, this is a total disaster, this position. I just thought that was quite fascinating, that from here so much damage is done from White. It's kind of backfired. This is an example, I guess, of a backfire, this B4. I guess, you know, if C takes B, well, actually White could actually generate some counterplay with Rook takes D4 here, so very good to avoid this sort of stuff. And that would lose Kramnik some rating points if there's any sniff of a draw, for example, like this, and a perpetual check situation. That would be a loss of rating points. But no, he just used the pawn sack basically, and the structural damage has been inflicted by White, which is not going to go away that easily here. So Rook B6 just causing damage on the diagonal. It's very interesting positional play, and once that pawn's taken, this pawn is just so dangerous. I just thought, wow, how does he do this from these simple positions? That's Vladimir Kramnik for you. So okay, let's have a look at another example. So Paulo Besamina, a 2-3-6-3, is playing against another very, very strong player, Aleksandar Mosenko, a 2-7-0-7. And Mosenko, playing Black, plays C4, and White might be thinking, why is this? Can't I just win 2 rooks for the queen? He takes on C4 and he wins 2 rooks for the queen. And what I thought, why this was interesting, is a kind of virtual sack, because you don't normally want to give 2 rooks away for the queen. But here, in this particular scenario, it seems that it's White's A pawn which is a big problem, and the configuration here, that after Rook D4, C3 is possible. And okay, so if taking here, not here, Rook takes B4, but in this position, Queen B3 leaves very big problems for White, actually. Very, very big problems. So that really can't be taken. This Queen B3 resource, factoring that in, I thought was quite nifty as a concept. So knight E1, Queen B3, and it seems Black's in the driving seat here. So it's not always that great for this 2 rooks for the queen, and this is one such scenario where now we've got this a pawn dragging down, like in the Kramnik game, I guess, the a pawn, dreaded a pawn, to factor in to things. So knight d5 was played here, knight a2, bishop drops back, knight b4 after takes. This is not pleasant. Again, I think this knight takes b4 backfires to queen b3, all-time overloading white. So f3 was played, queen b6, these pawns are going to be coming through, b3, b2, and now here white resigned. I just thought that was quite an interesting move, c4, very well calculated from Aleksandar Moisenko there. Breakthrough move. This next example, Elson Moradabadi 2598 playing white against Victor Laznica 2676. Black plays queen e8, and white now plays a move which really does backfire dramatically. White plays f4. What would you play here with black after f4? If I gave you 10 seconds, I'll flip the board for you here. So black to play, what would you play if I give you 10 seconds starting from now? Okay, black plays bishop takes f4, because there's after takes here, there's knight e5. That's pretty nasty stuff. It's going to win back material with advantage. So white actually crumbles quite badly now. He plays knight f3. Maybe actually objectively the engine suggests this is the strongest way to play it. We'd have this miserable position here, for example, like this, knight takes d3, and apparently this has knight takes g7. Oh, we're into realms of mega tactics here. Knight takes g7, queen d7, and black is still doing okay. Check here, bishop g6. I think we've got knight takes c1 on the cards, or knight takes rook. Yeah, so apparently, but the way white played it, white really crumbles quickly after this bishop takes f4. He plays knight f3, bishop b8. So that bishop's lurking around on this diagonal now, menacingly. Bishop c2, bishop g6. Now black takes on f5, check, and you see how weakened white's dark squares around the king are. So knight h5, the knight's coming in. Check, check from the bishop. Check. Knight takes h3 check. I'm not entirely sure actually now this happened in the game. I think white might have resigned around here. Knight takes h3 check. It could have been the final move. Because white is faced with a mate in 2 now. If king h1, queen g1 is mating. So rook takes g1, knight f2 checkmate, for example. So pretty nasty stuff, all triggered from this move f4, which seems maybe quite tempting. If black had moved the bishop, then white would be doing really well. For example, knight f3. White looks to have a very nice position. But yeah, bishop takes f4, pretty bad backfire there. This next example, Giulio Ernesto Granzuniga, 2663 playing white against Bologun, Victor Bologun of 2654. This is quite remarkable. Queen d2 looks to be aiming at b4, trying to show that's slightly vulnerable. But black plays a very ambitious move, more ambitious. The engine's kind of suggesting protect the pawn. This is far more interesting and dynamic, I think. Knight c5, which the engine likes as well. But we're now threatening as black. Knight takes b3. And white plays a slip up here. This is quite a dangerous position indeed. If queen takes b4, for example, knight takes rook ab1. Knight d4. Black is doing very, very well here in this position, getting rid of white's better bishop potentially and leaving that kind of bad bishop. So white actually played this, rook a b1. Perhaps rook a c1 would have kept things about equal. So rook a b1 kind of backfires kind of badly here. After rook takes a2, queen takes b4. Can you guess what black plays in this position? And is quite remarkable, really. But we see a lot of positions with rooks on the 7th, and to me it comes a bit like football, like a corner kick. So you just need attackers in the centre to help the corner kick. Can you see what black plays to help the corner kick here? If I give you 10 seconds starting from now. So Victor Bologan, okay, plays knight c takes e4. F takes e4 was played. We have queen takes e4, and it's very difficult for white in this position. White tries in the game queen e1, and after now knight g4, white actually resigned in the game. So a few questions here. Why does white resign in this position? Well, if bishop d2, then this check is actually quite crushing. If king g2, knight e3 check, remember we got that pin. So what does white do here? If king here, here we can actually get the material back with advantage with knight takes f1, getting the queen away from d2. And this is just horrible for white, this sort of position. We're still threatening things now like rook a2. So yeah, and if we look at this, well, in this position, instead of queen e1, let's have a look at some other alternatives. Bishop f2 would be answerable here. There's quite crushing moves. Again, knight g4 is strong, but even rook takes f2 apparently is possible. If takes check is actually a forced mate, like this. Check, check. Now if king g1, then queen f2 to h2 is mating. So bishop g2, this is actually just forcing mate after queen f4, believe it or not. If king g1 here, check, 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 queen g1 check, the classic smothered mate comes into mind here. Knight f2 comes into sight. So yeah, it's just remarkable that well, black converted his pressure on the a file into something remarkable around white's king. Even though visually there seems to be a lot of protection around the king, it all seems to be getting stripped away with this sacrifice. Knight c takes e4. So I think that was quite a powerful sacrifice, one of the more spectacular from yesterday. Quite a brilliant one. So now this next example, Robin van Kampen against Ruzen Akobian. So Akobian is actually, sorry, I flipped the board, is playing black. And this is a very simplified endgame, but white plays a very important breakthrough move, it seems. But first it's black's to play. Black played bishop f5. It's a difficult position for Ruzen, who recently tie-breaked first in the USA Championship. I think lost on tie-break only. But it's a very difficult position. White to play here. What would you play with white? If I give you 10 seconds to pause the video here. So what did Robin van Kampen play here? He's a 2-6-3-8. So not that much lower rated than Ruzen Akobian, who's 2-6-5-3. So white to play. Okay. A breakthrough move c5. Very difficult to meet, actually. If knight takes, well, knight takes c5 was played. If d takes, this is simpler to understand, actually. King c4, and then we're going into b5, and these pawns are all pretty vulnerable. if bishop d7, bishop e3, and then c5 drops, maybe even white doesn't even have to immediately take on c5. But this is a very difficult endgame position. Veselin took on c5 with the knight. Bishop takes b4. The knight goes back. But now bishop a5. This is a very difficult pawn to defend. Knight b6. And then we see f4 hitting this pawn. That's protected. Bishop f3. In this difficult position, bishop g4 check. Bishop f5 is played. Now this really, maybe you could argue it doesn't help black at all. Apparently king f7 might keep black in the game a little bit longer. It's only a small advantage for white. But yeah, this unfortunately bishop f5, I guess you could say it quite badly backfires with bishop takes b6, c takes, and here king e3. Ouch. Oh dear. This is a kind of zugzwang. The king cannot move without losing the bishop. The bishop doesn't really want to take here because it leads to a lost king and pawn ending. b5 doesn't really help. King d4 in the same sort of zugzwang position. White's got a route to this pawn here in any ending. In the game continuation, this is a bad zugzwang, yes. Bishop takes, king takes. Unfortunately, f5 will leave white without any problems with his pawn. There'll be no access route for the king. So f5, no access route for the king to get to any of his pawns. And yet white can get to black's b pawn like this and leave another zigzag position. So Veselin had to resign here. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this little tour of yesterday. Some interesting moments that I've noted down. You could call them in some cases sacrifices and backfires, but some of the sacrifices I admit are from good positions. Some are just really amazing. Okay, hope you enjoyed it. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.